Hello, my name is Maureen, and my son David died of meningitis in 2002. He was only 2.5 when that happened.
So my name's Sam, and I'm mum to Callum and Leo, who are currently 9 and 4. And back in 2015, we lost my middle son, Alex. He was my younger son at the time, to meningitis.
Right, so my name's Carolyn Stewart, and I'm mum to Faye. We lost Faye to pneumococcal meningitis in 2004 when she was 3.5.
Grief is a really difficult thing to describe. And I know everybody says it affects everybody differently, but even within our family, everybody has experienced it very differently.
It has been very hard. It was shock for the initial period. And then I think it was followed by a sense of almost denial, really, and keeping very, very busy, but not necessarily dealing with my grief. And then 5 years later, experiencing what was perhaps delayed grief, which then followed just a period of depression, I would say, where everything just seemed to lack purpose.
Those early days were very much denial and self-protection. I've experienced every emotion under the sun, but the most vivid ones that I remember were a regular rising sense of panic that something had happened and I couldn't solve it.
I suppose as the shock starts to ease and you realise this is it, we don't have David anymore, you start to get angry.
For a number of years, thought that when she passed away in my arms, I seem to remember this scream coming out of my mouth. And yet, having finally spoken to other people, nobody else recalls me screaming. And I would say that that's very much what grief has been like for me, where it's this internal scream.
Why did this happen to me? Why did it happen to us as a family? We're good people.
Grief is definitely a journey. 16 years on, I'm in a much better place now, but it has been a very long journey. And there's lots of turns and corners along the way. And
now I have learned how to recognise the signs that grief is coming. It really does come in waves. Sometimes it's something completely out of the blue that you might hear on the news or you see on the TV that just really brings back all these memories. And that's really hard to deal with because you can't prepare for it.
Talk about them to anybody that will listen. If you have family and you have close friends, talk about them regularly. Talk about them when they were alive. Talk about how you feel now that you've lost them.
Talking is invaluable. And initially, if I spoke to somebody about my daughter, I was always terrified of upsetting other people. And I was worried about what their reaction might be. So I tended not to speak. And I think that was rather damaging in the long run.
And I enjoy talking about Alex. And a lot of people find that really hard. So if you explain to friends and people around you, I want to talk, or these are my boundaries that I'm happy to talk about, then it can just really help everybody feel more comfortable and help people support each other.
And also connection is just hugely important. So no one quite understands a bereaved parent like another bereaved parent. So having that connection with others. And for me, that's been online support.
Don't keep your emotions inside. Don't bottle them up. Talk. If you don't feel that you can talk to another family member or a close friend, there are professionals out there, and go and talk to them and they won't judge you. After David had died and Connor had started school, I would have avoided talking to strangers because I didn't want to deny that I had this other child, but at the same time, I didn't want to talk about how I had lost David. I wasn't ready to talk to strangers, people that I'd never met before.
Something that I found quite difficult is when people say to me that you will learn to live with it and it will become your new normal. Things will go back to how they were and you'll learn how to live with it. And I've always found that very, very difficult because a part of me says I don't want things to go back to the way they were, because that would be denying that this had happened and denying that we had Alex.
At the time, people, and I suppose they were saying it because that's what a lot of people say, oh, they're in a better place. And I suppose I was angry with that, because I would have thought, no, there is no better place for a child to be than with their parents.
As a lady, doctors tend to ask how many children you've had. You know, it just seems to be a question where they ask about pregnancies in just about all appointments. So I am perhaps more prepared for that.
So I would find that if I answered, I've got 2 children, I would feel awful for the rest of the day and just beat myself up about the fact that I'd lied. If I say, I've had 3 children, but one of them died, they feel awful for a few minutes, but it's only a few minutes out of their day. So I've had to sort of train myself not to worry too much about other people's reactions.
Once Rory was born, then there's a 5-year gap between Connor and Rory. And the comment, oh, that's a big gap. Was that planned? And initially you go to say no, and then think, okay, I now know how to talk about this. No, it wasn't planned. I had a son in between. Unfortunately, he died of meningitis, you know, and I got with time and being told, and I think it was nice to be able to hear that from the befriender, that, yeah, they might be a wee bit awkward for a while. They might feel a wee bit, ooh, I shouldn't have asked that. I didn't want to hear this answer, but actually they can walk away from it. I now know that I have to live with the pain of the loss. The person and the stranger that you make feel awkward, they only have to cope with it for about the 5 minutes that they're talking to you, and they can walk away from it and not have to worry about it again.